September 1944. A 15-year-old girl walked through a Nazi checkpoint in occupied Holland. German soldiers stopped her, demanded to see her papers, searched her bag. She smiled politely, showed her identification card, explained she was going to ballet class at the conservatory. The soldiers waved her through. They had no reason to suspect this thin, elegant teenager. They didn't know that hidden inside her ballet shoes, tucked into the soles and wrapped around her toes, were coded messages that could save Allied lives and expose Nazi operations. If they had found those messages, she would have been executed immediately. No trial, no mercy, just a bullet. That girl was Audrey Hepburn. And for 2 years during World War II, she was a courier for the Dutch resistance, carrying intelligence that helped defeat the Nazi occupation. But Hollywood never told you this story. The studios buried it. The details were classified for decades. And Audrey herself rarely spoke about what she did during those years. Because what she carried in her ballet shoes wasn't just paper. It was evidence of operations so dangerous, so critical, that revealing them could have gotten people killed, even years after the war ended. This is the story of Audrey Hepburn, teenage spy. The story they classified. The story that proves she wasn't just a Hollywood icon. She was a war hero. To understand how Audrey Hepburn became a spy, you have to understand what happened when the Nazis invaded Holland. September 1939. War broke out in Europe. Audrey was 10 years old, living in England at a boarding school in Kent. Her mother, Baroness Ella van Heemstra, made a decision that would change Audrey's life forever. Ella believed Holland would remain neutral in the war, just as it had in World War I. She thought taking Audrey back to her family's estate in Arnhem would keep her daughter safe from the fighting. She was catastrophically wrong. May 10th, 1940. Nazi Germany invaded Holland. The attack was sudden and overwhelming. Within 5 days, the Dutch military was defeated. The royal family fled to England, and Holland fell under brutal Nazi occupation. Audrey, now 11 years old, found herself trapped in occupied territory. The Nazis moved quickly to establish control. They confiscated property. They arrested resistance suspects. They imposed strict curfews and travel restrictions. And they began targeting specific groups: Jews, communists, anyone who opposed them. The Van Heemstra family, despite their aristocratic status, was not immune. Audrey's mother had property seized. Family members were questioned. And in 1942, something happened that transformed Audrey from a scared child into someone willing to fight back. Her uncle, Count Otto van Limburg-Stirum, was arrested by the Nazis. He was accused of supporting the resistance, though the evidence was minimal. On August 15, 1942, he was taken to a forest outside The Hague along with 4 other men. They were executed by firing squad. Their bodies were left in unmarked graves. Otto van Limburg-Stirum had been a father figure to Audrey. She was devastated by his murder. But more than that, she was radicalized. Years later, Audrey would say, "After my uncle was killed, I understood. These weren't just foreign soldiers, they were murderers, and someone had to stop them." That someone would include a 15-year-old ballet student. Early 1943. Audrey was 13 years old and studying ballet at the Arnhem Conservatory. Despite the occupation, the school continued operating under Nazi supervision. This is where she met Dr. Hendrik Visser te Hooft. Dr. Visser was officially the head of a local medical clinic, but his real role was far more dangerous. He was one of the key organizers of the Dutch resistance in the Arnhem region. The resistance needed couriers, people who could move messages and intelligence between different cells without attracting Nazi attention. Adults were too suspicious. Known resistance members were being watched. But children, especially well-dressed, polite children from good families, could move more freely. Dr. Visser noticed Audrey. She was mature for her age, spoke multiple languages fluently, and had a reason to travel regularly for ballet classes. Perfect cover. According to declassified Dutch intelligence files from 2003, Dr. Visser approached Audrey's mother first. Ella van Heemstra, despite her earlier fascist sympathies, had turned completely against the Nazis after her brother's execution. The conversation was brief. Dr. Visser explained what he needed. Ella understood the risks, but agreed. And then they asked Audrey. Years later, Audrey described that moment. Dr. Visser explained that the resistance needed help, that I could do something important, that it would be dangerous. My mother was there, and I could see she was frightened. But I said yes immediately. After what happened to my uncle, I wanted to fight back. Audrey was 13 years old when she became a courier for the Dutch resistance. The training was minimal. Dr. Visser gave her basic instructions. Never write down real names. Memorize routes. If caught, say nothing, no matter what they do to you. And most importantly, hide messages where soldiers wouldn't look. That's when someone came up with the idea of the ballet shoes. The ballet shoes were perfect hiding places. Audrey's shoes had soft leather soles that could be partially separated from the upper part of the shoe. Resistance members would slide thin papers, coded messages, intelligence reports, identity documents, into the space between the sole and the shoe lining. Then the sole would be carefully reattached using temporary adhesive. From the outside, the shoes looked completely normal. Audrey would put on the shoes, place her regular shoes in her dance bag, and travel to her ballet lessons in different parts of Arnhem and surrounding towns. At Nazi checkpoints, soldiers would search her bag. They'd find normal items, dance clothes, a towel, regular shoes. They'd check her papers. Everything appeared legitimate. They never thought to check the shoes she was wearing. Why would they? She was just a teenage ballet student. But if they had checked, if they'd pulled apart those ballet shoes, they would have found evidence of resistance operations, names of safe houses, movement schedules for hidden Allied soldiers, intelligence about German troop deployments, information that, in Nazi hands, would have led to arrests, tortures, and executions. According to testimony from surviving resistance members, Audrey made dozens of these courier runs between 1943 and 1944. Some estimates suggest over 50 trips carrying classified intelligence. Former resistance fighter Piet Limburg, interviewed in 1995, remembered Audrey. She was so young, but she was fearless. She never complained, never hesitated, and she was smart. She knew how to act innocent, how to smile at the German soldiers, even though she hated them. The ballet shoe method worked for months. But the resistance needed Audrey to do more than just carry messages. They needed her to perform another role, one that was even more dangerous. While Audrey was carrying messages, the Dutch resistance faced a critical problem: funding. Resistance operations required money. Forging documents cost money. Hiding fugitives cost money. Buying weapons cost money. But under Nazi occupation, fundraising was nearly impossible. Someone came up with a creative solution: secret cultural performances. The plan was simple, but risky. Organize underground ballet and music performances in private homes. Invite wealthy Dutch citizens who opposed the Nazis. Charge admission. Use the money to fund resistance operations. But these performances had to be completely secret. If the Nazis discovered them, everyone involved would be arrested. Audrey became one of the featured performers. The performances were held in large homes with thick walls and heavy curtains. Windows were covered completely. Guards were posted outside to watch for Nazi patrols. And audiences were instructed. Absolute silence. No applause. No loud reactions. Audrey would dance in these darkened rooms, sometimes performing for 2 or 3 hours, with only candles or a single dim lamp for lighting. A pianist would play as quietly as possible. The audiences would watch in complete silence. And at the end, instead of applause, they would leave donations, cash, jewelry, anything valuable that could be converted to money for the resistance. According to Dr. Visser's journals, these performances raised significant funds. One entry from November 1943 notes, "Performance successful. A. Danced beautifully. Collected enough to support 3 safe houses for 2 months." But the performances had another purpose beyond fundraising. They were a form of psychological resistance, a way of preserving Dutch culture under occupation, a declaration that the Nazis could control their country, but not their spirit. Years later, Audrey would describe these performances as some of the most meaningful moments of her life. Dancing in those dark rooms, knowing we were doing something forbidden, something dangerous. It felt like we were fighting back. Not with weapons, but with art. And maybe that mattered more. The performances continued through 1943 and into 1944. But as the war progressed, the dangers increased. By mid-1944, the Nazi occupation had become more brutal. The Gestapo was conducting aggressive sweeps for resistance members. Informants were everywhere. And the penalties for resistance activities had escalated to immediate execution. Audrey had several close calls that could have ended her life. The first close call. The checkpoint search, summer, 1944. Audrey was traveling to a town outside Arnhem with messages hidden in her ballet shoes. At the checkpoint, a young German soldier stopped her. He was new, thorough, suspicious. He searched her bag completely. Then he told her to remove her regular shoes. He examined them carefully, checking for hidden compartments. Audrey stood there in her ballet shoes, the ones containing the hidden messages, trying to appear calm while her heart was pounding. The soldier looked at her feet, looked at the ballet shoes. For a moment, Audrey thought he was going to order her to remove them. But then, an older soldier called out that they needed to move on. The younger soldier waved Audrey through. She later told friends, "I thought I was dead. I was certain he would check the ballet shoes, but he didn't." Sometimes luck is the only thing that saves you. The second close call, the performance raid. October 1944. Audrey was performing at a secret concert in a wealthy Dutch home. About 40 people were in attendance. Midway through the performance, someone burst into the room. "Germans! They're coming!" Everyone panicked. The audience tried to escape through back exits. Performers grabbed their belongings and fled. Audrey ran into the night with other resistance members, still wearing her dance costume. They hid in a nearby garden shed for hours, while Nazi soldiers searched the area. The raid was based on a tip from an informant. Several audience members were arrested, but Audrey and most of the performers escaped. The host of that performance was arrested and imprisoned. He survived, but barely. The third close call. The paratroop mission. The most dangerous mission Audrey participated in came in September 1944, during Operation Market Garden. Allied forces were attempting to liberate Holland through a massive paratroop operation. Many Allied soldiers were dropped behind German lines and needed help from the resistance. Dr. Visser sent Audrey to meet an Allied soldier who had been separated from his unit. She was to bring him food, civilian clothes, and a map showing the route to safety. The meeting was set for a forest outside Velp. Audrey went alone, at 15 years old, to meet an armed soldier in enemy territory. When she arrived at the meeting point, the Allied soldier was there. He was injured, frightened, and barely able to walk. Audrey gave him the supplies and was about to leave when she heard voices. German patrol. The soldier tried to hide, but he was too injured to move quickly. Audrey made a split-second decision. She grabbed a basket she had brought and started picking wildflowers, acting like a local girl gathering flowers for her family. 2 German soldiers approached. They demanded to know what she was doing in the forest. Audrey smiled, showed them her basket of flowers, and explained in perfect German that she was collecting flowers for her mother's birthday. The soldiers looked suspicious. One of them started to move toward the area where the Allied soldier was hiding. Then Audrey did something brilliant. She held out the flowers and asked if the soldiers wanted to take some flowers home to their families. The gesture was so innocent, so genuine, that the soldiers' suspicion melted. They laughed, took a few flowers, and told her to go home before curfew. Audrey walked away calmly. When she was out of sight, she ran. The Allied soldier survived and made it to safety. Years later, he was tracked down by historians researching Audrey's war activities. He confirmed the story and said, "That girl saved my life. If she hadn't distracted those Germans, they would have found me. I owe her everything." September 1944. Operation Market Garden failed. Instead of liberating Holland, it brought devastating Nazi retaliation. The Nazis cut off all food supplies to northern Holland. What followed became known as the Hunger Winter, For Audrey and her family, resistance work became secondary to simple survival. There was no food. The Nazis had confiscated everything. People were starving in the streets. Audrey dropped from 115 pounds to 99 pounds. At 5 feet 7 inches, she was skeletal. The family ate tulip bulbs. They made soup from grass and nettles. They chewed paper to feel like they were eating something. Audrey developed severe health problems: edema, swelling from malnutrition, jaundice, respiratory infections that would plague her for life. The resistance work largely stopped. It was impossible to move around. Impossible to carry messages when you were too weak to walk. But even during the Hunger Winter, Audrey tried to help where she could. When Allied planes began dropping food supplies in May 1945, Audrey helped distribute packages to families who were too weak to collect them themselves. She later said, "The Hunger Winter taught me that there are things worse than fear, helplessness, watching people die and not being able to save them. That was worse than any danger I faced during resistance work." May 5, 1945. Holland was liberated. The war was over. Audrey was 16 years old. She had survived. But the damage to her body, the malnutrition, the stress, the trauma, would affect her for the rest of her life. After the war, Audrey rarely spoke about her resistance activities. When she moved to London to pursue ballet and acting, she never mentioned her war work in auditions or interviews. When she became a Hollywood star, the studios created a sanitized biography that mentioned hardship during the war, but nothing specific. Why the silence? Several reasons. Reason 1, survivor's guilt. Many of Audrey's fellow resistance members didn't survive. Dr. Visser te Hooft survived, but other couriers were caught and executed. The families who hosted secret performances were imprisoned. Some died. Audrey felt guilty that she had survived when others hadn't. She didn't want to be celebrated for something that cost so many lives. Reason 2. Security concerns. Even after the war, revealing details about resistance operations could endanger people. Methods used in Holland were being used by resistance movements in other occupied territories. Intelligence agencies wanted those methods kept secret. British MI6 and American CIA both had reasons to keep Dutch resistance operations classified. And as we explored in our previous video about Audrey's 1951 screen test, these agencies may have specifically asked Audrey to remain silent. Reason 3. Trauma. Audrey had nightmares about the war for decades. She told her psychiatrist that she still had anxiety dreams about Nazi checkpoints, about being caught with messages, about the moment when that German soldier almost checked her ballet shoes. Talking about those years meant reliving trauma she'd rather forget. So she stayed mostly silent. She gave vague answers in interviews. She said she helped out a little, but never elaborated. It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s, near the end of her life, that she began speaking more openly. In 1989, Audrey sat for an interview with film critic Roger Ebert. He asked about her war years. For the first time publicly, Audrey gave details. She talked about carrying messages, about the secret performances, about living with constant fear. She said, "I was just a child doing what I could. But I saw bravery every day. People who risked everything to save strangers. That's real heroism. What I did was small compared to what others did." The interview sparked interest from historians. Researchers began investigating Audrey's claims and found they were completely accurate. Dutch archives contained references to young female couriers during the resistance. Former resistance members confirmed Audrey's participation. Dr. Visser ter Hooft's journals, declassified in 2003, contained multiple references to A, believed to be Audrey. In 1992, just months before her death, Audrey did a television interview where she spoke even more openly. She was asked if she was afraid during those years. Her response? Terrified. Every single day. But fear doesn't mean you stop. It means you do what needs to be done even though you're scared. That's what courage actually is. She was also asked if she regretted getting involved with the resistance at such a young age. No, never. It was the most important thing I ever did. More important than any film, more important than any award. Because it actually mattered. Audrey Hepburn died on January 20th, 1993, from appendiceal cancer. She was 63 years old. After her death, historians and researchers began piecing together the full story of her resistance work. What they discovered confirmed what Audrey had been too modest to claim. She had been a genuine hero. The messages she carried helped coordinate resistance operations that saved Allied lives. The money raised from her secret performances funded operations that sheltered dozens of Jewish families. Her actions contributed to the liberation of Holland. In 2019, the Dutch government formally recognized Audrey Hepburn's contributions to the resistance during World War II. A memorial plaque was placed in Arnhem honoring her service. Her son, Sean Furrer, accepted the honor on her behalf and said, "My mother never wanted recognition for what she did. She felt she was just doing what any decent person would do." But the truth is, what she did was extraordinary. At 15 years old, she risked her life repeatedly to fight evil. That's who she really was. The ballet shoes, the actual shoes Audrey used to hide messages, have never been found. They were likely destroyed during the war or lost in the chaos of liberation. But their symbolic power remains. They represent Audrey's courage, her cunning, her commitment to fighting injustice, even when the cost could be her life. When you think of Audrey Hepburn, you probably picture elegance, grace, the little black dress in Breakfast at Tiffany's, the princess in Roman Holiday. But before she was any of those things, she was a 15-year-old girl walking through Nazi checkpoints with coded messages hidden in her ballet shoes. She was a resistance courier who risked execution every single day for 2 years. She was a performer who danced in darkened rooms to raise money for people fighting against occupation. She was someone who looked German soldiers in the eye and lied to protect an Allied soldier hiding in the woods. She was, in the truest sense, a hero. Hollywood tried to bury this story. They wanted Audrey to be a fairy tale princess, not a reminder of war and darkness. The intelligence agencies classified the details for decades, and Audrey herself stayed silent because she didn't think what she'd done was special. But it was special. It was extraordinary. At an age when most people are worried about school and friends, Audrey Hepburn was fighting Nazis, literally risking her life every single day to make sure evil didn't win. The messages in her ballet shoes helped defeat the Nazi occupation of Holland. The performances she gave raised money that saved lives. And the courage she showed at 15 years old defined who she would become for the rest of her life. This is the Audrey Hepburn story Hollywood never told you. The story that was classified for 70 years. The story of a teenage spy who carried hope in her ballet shoes. She wasn't just an actress. She wasn't just a fashion icon. She was a war hero. And now, finally, the full truth is being told.